and neglect. Tired of centuries of disrespect.
Gotta take your knee off my neck.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. We just can't go on this way. We've got to break these chains. Now's the time to make a change. Together we can celebrate again.
I'ma do the here and tomorrow.
Say the name.
Orlando, Freddie, Eric, and Jamal.
Say the name.
Sandy, George, and Rihanna.
Say it.
Make me wanna scream and holler.
Sick and tired. So sick and tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. We can't breathe. No more mothers crying, no more others dying. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. We can't breathe. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. No justice, no being sick and tired. I'm so tired of being sick and tired. No justice, no being sick and tired.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough.
Of all the rules you break,
We've had enough.
of all the money you make,
We've had enough.
no more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough.
Of all the rules you were breaking,
We had enough.
of all the money you were making,
We had enough.
no more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough. Of all the rules you're breaking. We've had enough.
All the money you're making,
We've had enough.
no more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the proclamation.
We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice.
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many gone, how can we fill the void?
How can we feel?
We had enough. John Crawford, I know you've heard.
We've had enough.
Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand.
We've had enough.
Sean Bell,
Sean Bell.
what the hell?
We've had enough.
Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said?
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
today. Uh, well, here we are. Those two songs set the table for a conversation today. Uh, One could say we've had enough, and that we're concerned about what's going on in our community, in our world. We're standing at the confluence, the intersection of both the pandemic of COVID-19 and the pandemic of 1619. The question is ultimately a question of freedom, of dignity, of justice, and how both the unending and systemic oppression, the almost seemingly I don't know what the word is, but the continued presence in policy and in action of white supremacist thought. That, and as it shows up in health policy, in economics policy, in education policy, in justice policy, all of these things are on the table right now, and they're exacerbated, they're highlighted by both the trial downtown, the trial for the officer accused in the murder of George Floyd, and they are highlighted in the ongoing disparities we experience, Black people and brown people experience with the COVID-19 crisis. Well, we're here to talk about justice in particular, and I'm pleased to have two guests today who will bring awareness to specifics in the question of justice. Delshia Perry. Am I saying your name properly, Delshia?
Yes, you are. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining the program.
Yes,
and
thank you.
I'm going to describe you in a second, and then also on the call is Brother Philip. Let me find my notes here. Who is working to deal with, the prison issue, prison safety in prisons, incarceration, just how we are handling that question. But let me start with Delshia Perry. You are an evangelist, a mother, and you are an inventor.
Yes.
You created a nonprofit organization, you're a public speaker, and you present yourself as a freedom fighter and change agent. And your story talks about your showing up in the world as a follower of Christ, right? And a single mother who raised a son, Hardell Sherrill, and who, this story takes off when your son died in the care of the state of Minnesota. Let me start with that. You can fill the story in from there. And first of all, you must know that we all still extend our condolences to you as a parent and to your family for the loss of your son.
Thank you.
Tell the story. And let me tell people listening here on KFAI, but you're also joining the program on YouTube and or on Facebook. And if you're monitoring on Facebook or YouTube and want to comment or raise a question, or just let us know that you're listening, send us a note in the comment in the chat, like the program, subscribe to it on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook. But let us know we're reaching you and that you're part of this conversation as well. So go ahead, Delshia Perry.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say thank you, Mr. McFarlane. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, no, my name is Al.
Al, okay.
There we
Well,
go.
God bless you. I just want to be respectful. I thank you for this opportunity to be able to come and speak with your audience and your listeners. And I don't take it for granted. And then I just want to say, before I even begin to speak, I give God all the glory, because he woke me up this morning and started me on my way in my right mind and in good health. And he is the head of my life. And I always reverence him before I do and go anywhere, because the footsteps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. And I know that with what God has called me to do for such a time as this is to help the voiceless have a voice. So we're going to go back a little bit. And then I'll come forward. So September 2nd of 2018, my son was carried out of the Beltrami County Jail in a body bag. But he walked in on August 24th, healthy, vibrant, joyous, considering that he was there to pay his debt to society. But he was ready to do that. My son made some mistakes, but he was ready to own up to what he had done and was looking at a possible 5-year prison sentence. And he had never been to prison prior to. So at any rate, I say that because a lot of people have questioned, well, he was in there, so he must have deserved what he got. Absolutely not. What happened to my son was criminal. And I am praying that those that were in the position that could have done something to help my son and chose not to, that they will be held accountable. Because the law cannot continue to think that because they are the law, that they are above the law. But what they did to my son was absolutely inhumane and criminal on every level. On the third day, when my son was in custody, he had fallen out of his bunk. He called me crying because he was in so much pain. And he said, Mama, he said, I'm in so much pain. I barely could even stand up and talk to you on the phone. And I said, oh my God. I said, well, what happened? He said, I don't know. I was getting up and I fell out of the bunk and they left me on the floor for 25 minutes. He was outraged. Well, then this went on, for a couple more days, and I just stayed in prayer. He called me again, and then now this time he called me in tears, saying he was in so much pain that he felt like he could just roll over and die. He said nobody believes him. They think that he's faking his illnesses and whatever. They wouldn't take him to the doctor. He'd been pleading with them to take him to the doctor. He kept saying he couldn't feel his legs. He couldn't move his arms. And like I said, he was in such pain that he couldn't even really stand to talk to me on the phone. Well, mother, of course, hears that. And what do? I called to the jail and I began to plead with the jailers and say, hey, my son is calling me. He's in tears. This is not right because my son has a very high tolerance for pain. And if he's calling me crying, there's something seriously wrong. They didn't care. They didn't care. Al, I'm going to just put it like it is. They didn't care. They let my baby lay on that jail cell floor day after day after day. This would go on for 6 long, excruciating days of him not knowing, was he going to get any medical care? Did anybody care? He was starving to death. He was left to be in a urine and feces filled, depends, on a cold jail cell floor for days. By the time he did go to the hospital, after the whistleblowing nurse, nurse got wind of what was going on, because she went into the jail, she saw him, and I will not say her name to protect the privacy of who she is, but she told me in her own words, before the FBI got involved and started to do an investigation, because that's what's going on right now. I told her, well, we won't talk until after the investigation is over. But she told me that she went in there and saw my son lying on that mat, and it was urine filled. I mean, it was soaked with urine, and the smell, it overtook her. She just could not, the stench was overwhelming. And she said what she saw when my son was crying out to her, pleading with her, please don't leave me in here with these guys. Please don't leave me alone with them. She said she thought she was witnessing a murder happen right before her very eyes.
Wow.
It did something to her in the fact that she quit the next day. So with that being said, he went to the hospital because she said, no, he needs medical care. his oxygen level is off, his blood pressure is way high, all of these other things. There were so many red flags as to what was going on. She couldn't believe he wasn't already hospitalized. But because she pushed, they went and took him to the hospital, where they said he was malingering, which is faking it, and weakness. And they discharged him because one of the officers, one of the officers that escorted Hardell to Sanford Medical in North Dakota told the physician, well, he was moving his legs the night before. He's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. He's absolutely fine. So the officer convinced this physician to let him go back to jail.
Rubber stamp.
Rubber stamp. Absolutely, sir.
Yeah.
He goes back to jail, and the videos that were released through Unicorn Riot, because Nico and Georgia did an amazing job of getting an interview with me, and I allowed them to get these videos from inside the jail to show the truth of what happened to my son to the world. Because people were just like, I remember when I told Philip, he was like, what? I can't believe that this happened. And when those videos came out, they were all like shocked. Like, this is something you would see in a third world country, not in the United States, not in one of the United States, let alone Minnesota, who has by far the best medical care in pretty much all the 50 states, right? With Mayo Clinic and everything being here.
Yeah.
At any rate, so this was excruciating for me as his mother to do, but I knew I had to do this so the world could see the ugly truth of how deep racism runs in Minnesota and throughout the country. And we must do something to stop it. So I said, okay, I made the executive decision to show these videos. There was one point when he got back from the hospital, they drag him in to, let me back up, excuse me. He's in the Sally Port. That's where you drive in the vehicles that are inside of the jail, and it's like a garage, but they call it a Sally Port. He goes into the Sally Port. They are talking about whatever they're talking about, and you can see this on the videos. They allow him to fall out of the vehicle on the hard cement floor on his knees. And then they try to drag him into the wheelchair that he can't pull himself up to get in. And they kind of just let him flop in the wheelchair. Well, they couldn't get him in the wheelchair, so they let him fall yet again, this time flat on his face. And they stand around talking about God only knows what for several minutes while he lay there. And you can see him twitching, and he's trying to, get himself up or trying to help himself in whatever way he can, helpless. Finally gave up. His head flings back because he's lost all muscle. He paralyzed.
I'm having difficulty hearing you. Hold on, I'm not sure if your signal is weak or if mine. Philip, are you hearing okay?
I'm hearing her okay, but she's breaking up on me as well.
Okay. Delshi, I don't know if you're changing positions or if you're out of a cell tower or if you've not moved, I don't know. But your voice is frozen right now. Maybe, why don't you leave the chat and come back in? And I'm going to talk to Philip in the meantime, right? And then you come back in, maybe your voice signal will be stronger. Philip, how you doing, brother?
Very well. It's so good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you here. And so you're part of explaining the story. You and I have had several conversations on the phone, but let me just ask you to introduce yourself and your work and what we've talked about and why you helped me set this program up.
Pretty much, I'm with IWOC, or Incarcerate Minnesota. And what we're trying to do is do an overhaul of the prison and the police, because all these systems work in conjunction with each other. Delshia is part of the group as such, but she has her own organization. It's called Be Their Voices. And I have such admiration for that sister. And until she comes back on, I just want to say real quick, what really astounded me about this whole story, Al, is that nobody thought that there was anything criminal that went on. I met this sister about 2.5 years ago, and she was out at Energy Park Drive, and it just seemed that she was all alone. I mean, there were people there, but you know, and I got to tell you, I went home and cried like a baby, and it angers me and it hurts me every time I hear this story. To be honest with you, I don't even know how these sisters do it. But the point I'm trying to make is that we have to approach this system in a holistic way. We can't separate it. You know, we have a lot of groups out here, and we're trying to tie all these groups in together because I know unity is the key. The thing is that Minnesota is very clever at crafting their racism the way they've done it. And I think that's why they've fallen under the radar for so long, is because, you know, they perfected this racism in such a so-called nice way. And I mean, they don't really do the real, I mean, when you're locked up in prison, they do have a mandate to where the guards can't put their hands on you. But if you so much as touch one of them, I mean, as far as just grabbing them, that's like an extra 5 years in prison. And so think about it. Now, in all the years Minnesota has been operating, you've only had one guard that's been killed. I think they told me that Gom in the last 100 years. So guard killings are routine in places like Illinois and California and places like that. Because the thing is that this state is very punitive in their sentencing. You know, just like the recent case with Brother Mayan Burrell that was released about 3 months ago for a crime he didn't commit by Amy Klobuchar's office. So the thing is that there is a lot of things that go on, and that is why we're so appreciative of you, because the news outlets up here, most of them have a buddy system with the criminal justice system. That's why a lot of these atrocities occur and we don't know anything about it. Until I met Delshia, I was not aware of what happened to her son in that jail. And I don't know if you saw that video or not, but it's the most horrendous thing you'd ever want to look at. A man lying in his feces, in his urine, and in his vomit. And nobody thinks to even investigate it. This wasn't even under investigation. And then when they finally forced, I don't know the guy's name, she has his name. When they finally forced him to investigate it, he said he saw no improprieties. He thought everything was on the up and up. And so what they were willing to do is just another death they can just sweep under the rug. And that is the reason why we have to educate people and give an understanding to the public, because this is something that affects us all. The thing is that what we have right now is millions and millions of dollars being spent in this so-called criminal justice system, and it's wasted. And that's what the taxpayers need to know. The system is so corrupt. You know, they just paid George Floyd's family $27 million, but that came out of our money. See, that's the thing that people don't understand. Right. I mean, we're pleased that, you know, they got paid and everything like that, but that money needs to come out of their pockets. You know, they need to have the type of insurance that attorneys and doctors have, you know, to where, you know, they will be personally responsible. We use all these terms about being held accountable and all this other kind of stuff, but we really don't force that narrative. We're always stuck in limbo as far as how we're explaining and articulating this stuff. All of that sounds good, but in reality, we don't really put this to where it needs to be.
One of the things I listened to the radio yesterday, I think it was the day before, and there was a program about this question of people dying in custody. And the story there was just as gripping as the one that Delshia was telling about her son. It was a family, I think it was a white family. I think it was on radio that I listened to it. And so I'm presuming they were white. And this child, maybe a young woman who was 18 or some age, ended up committing suicide. Same thing in custody, right? And kept telling officials that she was in a place that wasn't good. Nobody wanted to believe her, and she ended up committing suicide. One of the lessons in the news report was the probation officer coming to grips with the question of his accountability, that he entered the profession under the model that if you did a crime, you must pay. And my job as a probation officer is to make sure you pay, right? Mm-hmm. And that, anal obsession with payment at any cost, at all costs, he discovered over some period of time, several people that he'd been charged of had died, committed suicide. Mm-hmm. So there was no ability to look beyond that narrow job description and at the human cost, the human impact. And that's kind of what you're challenging, I think, is how do we look and see and understand differently that no matter what the failure, the human being remains a human being, and that there is value in every human life. And we have to figure out ways to reach out and connect and reconnect and redeem those that may have challenges, problems, directional, they're lost or are failing in some way, but failing is not who they are, it's what they did. It's the deed, right?
Amen.
And Amen. How do we get to where we understand that no matter what, it's still a human being and each human life has value? And, you sent me a document that said, no new crime, no new time. Did you send me that? I think you did.
I did, yes.
A fact sheet, and I just skimmed it, but it's fascinating. Number one, it's important that the document defines certain things like what is a crimeless revocation and what is a technical violation, because I think the average person doesn't even think about those things until you put it in front of them like you just did for me. And it says a crimeless revocation is when someone is returned to prison for not committing a new crime, but for a rule or quote unquote a technical violation of parole or probation. And then it says a technical violation is a violation of parole or probation that is not a new misdemeanor or felony crime. They can include being late to an appointment or curfew, losing or failing to find a job or housing, or testing positive for alcohol or drugs, and many other non-crimes. And I'll just read a couple of the basic facts here. This document says that 24% of Minnesota prisoners are there on a technical violation. 1/4 of the people who are in prison are there for a technical violation, not a new crime. They may have been late. They may have lost a job, couldn't get a job, lost housing, tested drunk or with drugs. They're back in prison. And here's the kicker. The cost for that person who's been technically violated is $41,366 per year, an estimated $80 million out of your and my taxes. Our budgets, our money is putting these people in prison at a cost of $80 million a year. And I didn't know this. Minnesota's prison population has gone up 500% since 1980. Let me say it again. Minnesota's prison population has gone up 500% since 1980. And Minnesota is one of only 12 states that's looking to increase its population and prison population prison and expenditures. The imprisonment rate has gone up by 43% since 2000, even though the crime rates in the state are at a 50-year low, that according to a MinPost 1915 story. And again, 87% of those who return to prison who were on parole in 2018 were returned for technical violations. Last comment here, race obviously plays a huge part. According to Hennepin County data, African Americans are twice and Native Americans 3 times as likely to be violated, parole violations each month over the experience of white people. So it's a bleak picture. It's a bleak picture.
It is.
And that's why that whole beginning song, Sick and Tired of Being Sick and Tired, means a lot to us right now, because this experience really plays itself out in every other dimension of our reality. It plays itself out the same way in education, in wealth building, in home ownership, in finance and banking. It plays out the same way in home ownership, for example, in business opportunity. It plays out the same way across the spectrum. And at the end of the day, having this conversation, telling the truth, telling our story is simply critically important. Delcia Perry, you're back now. Hopefully your sound is going to be stronger and better. Glad you're back.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Well, that's okay. It gave me a chance to introduce Brother Philip Holmes and to hear his passion and his ability to contextualize the story that you were telling. But let me go back to the story that you're telling, because sister, it's a powerful story.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to remember where I left off, and I apologize. Hardell,
and you can start anywhere. Just
bless your heart. Thank you. I was just reiterating the fact that there was someone who saw my son, crying out for help, and they just brought him back to the hospital. After he had been seen by a physician, was drugged into his room, his cell, thrown on the bunk. And they didn't care to pull his shirt down or put a blanket on. I mean, just those little things that would bother anybody else. They didn't care. And it was obvious on so many levels. And the officers leave, and they leave him kind of hanging off of the side of the bunk. Now he's no longer on a top bunk. He's on a lower bunk at this point, because Hardell was then eventually brought to the medically segregated area of the jail. Now, for those of your listeners who don't understand what that means, in layman's terms, it's you're in a medical area where they're supposed to be watching you even more so than in general population. So they're supposed to be coming in, doing well checks, checking on you, making sure you're okay. Are you still alive? Is there still life, and all of these things? And so what happens is that Hardell, eventually his head was hanging off of the side of his bunk, and you could see him trying to get his head back on the bunk, but he couldn't. He had no strength, because remember, as I was telling you, something triggered GBS, and I don't know what brings GBS on, but something brought it on. And GBS is a neurological disorder wherein the immune system attacks the nervous system, and you become paralyzed from the inside out. Okay. It is treatable, and it's very treatable with proper care and medical assistance and things of that nature. But if not, then you would succumb to it, which was what happened in my son's case. Well, at any rate, the day that they left him in that cell, he had fallen face down on the floor, from the bunk. His arm is pinned underneath him, and he lays there for nearly 8 hours, Al. 8 hours face down. on a cold cell floor. Nobody comes in to check on him, because had they done what they were supposed to do in the well-being checks in the medically segregated area of the jail, he would still be alive today. Had they done what they were supposed to do, and they did absolutely nothing to care for my son, except leave him there, make fun of him, talk about him, and just for whatever ungodly, evil reason, other than it was just pure evil. Pure evil is what we saw in the Beltrami County Jail. Now, if I can, I want to just reiterate that my son's case is not an isolated case by any means. There have been several deaths and suspicious deaths in the Beltrami County Jail. And as I was kind of doing some research, it seems like folks are dying in August and September. I don't know why that is. I need to do a little more research, but that's what I'm coming to find out. What's August and September? I don't know, but I'm going to find out, because God is going to reveal it to me, as he's been revealing all of these things. And I've been just pushing for answers. And we went to the DOC. That's when I met Brother Philip, with my brother Traren Cruz, who's with Black Lives Matter. And it was just he and I, and just a handful of my son's friends that had showed up, because we were there to get some answers. Like, how could you let this happen to this young man who walks in healthy, fine, and in good spirits, considering why he was there? 9 days. And he suffered for 6 days. But it was days, not minutes. And while my heart completely goes out to the George Floyd family, 8 minutes and 46 seconds is a long time. But imagine 6 days. I can't even.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I get it. I get it. 6 days of dying, of on the way to giving up the ghost.
Yes. 6 days. 6 days. And all I knew to do was continue to pray, because I know it works. And while I do believe what they had done to my son was pure evil, I had to forgive them, because it's the thing to do. It's the right thing to do in the eyes of God. And everything I do has to be pleasing unto him. And it's not for them, but it was for me. Because if I hadn't forgiven them, I would probably be in a sale asylum, literally. That was my only child. My only child.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, talking with Delshia Perry, talking about the loss of her son, the death of her son, in the custody of the Beltrami County Police Department, I think it is. And also on the call is a friend, Philip Holmes, who's an advocate and a person trying to educate the public about the need for and specific changes needed in the justice system, so that it actually is a justice system. You've talked, Delshia Perry, and worked. This is not just talk. You're on a mission. You are on a mission. And the mission has specific objectives and targets. And one of them, I'm looking at the notes here, says you worked with the Department of Corrections and others, the legislature, and created and moved forward the Hardell-Sherrill Act, which passed through one committee in the House. Talk about that. What is the act?
Yeah, well, there are so many moving pieces, as you know. And my attorney and I sat down and we looked at all of the issues surrounding my son's case and said, we just cannot have another Hardell-Sherrill. It just cannot be. We can't keep allowing, this to happen, to people that are there to pay their debt to society. Let them pay their debt to society and go home, or go to a treatment center or wherever they need to go, but let them go. So several of the things that are in the act is about saving lives first and foremost. In that people are held accountable, that there is this shared accountability within the DOC, the sheriff's associations, the associations of the sheriff's department, and all of these facilities, that everybody's on the same page as, okay, if we're going to have this medical care given, then we need to have another person come behind and look and make sure that T's are crossed and I's are dotted. It isn't going to just be where one person says, oh yeah, well, we did this and everything is, we're all good. Nope. Because that was the way that things they were doing before. And they weren't.
Old boy network. Old boy network.
That's right. The good old boy system.
And it's a question of people in power with authority, exacerbated by the fact they're dealing with an African American.
Yes.
And we experience their willingness or ability to devalue Black life.
Right.
You know, and so there's no compulsion in them to follow through and to do what their job really calls for. And it's easy to practice expediency as a tool of white supremacist thought and just say, oh, you know, I agree with whatever the jailer says. And then they send him back to his sentence, ends up being a sentence of death.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I, you know, this is why I push for the change, because jail reform is so needed. There have been no changes to the laws in over 100 years. They've been just sitting in the dockets, doing nothing, while we as taxpayers keep paying. You said $80 million per year. Come on, that's way too much. And nothing's being changed. You guys keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And no, there needs to be this shared accountability on all levels. And the well-being checks is another big thing that they need to know. If you're saying that the well-being checks are going to be done this way, then do them the way that they're supposed to be done. That will help someone's life. Don't just look in the window or walk past the door and say you've done a well-being check, which they probably didn't even do that much in my son's case. But you're supposed to go in and check to see if there's life and ask the person, are you okay? What, you know, do you need, you know, whatever, right? That was not done in my son's case. And in so many other of these cases of people who have died while in custody, in particular in the Beltrami County Jail. And so those are some of the things that we're, you know, putting in this bill. And just, you know, communication is key. Paperwork and documentation, and that it is documented and it is filed properly and it goes to the right parties involved. Because I don't know if you recall, but back when my son, when he first when his death was investigated, they did their own investigation. We're not doing that. We need an outside, you know, agency to come in and do in-depth investigations. You're not going to investigate yourself and be like, oh yeah, no, nothing's wrong, and continue this crazy pattern, because it's crazy. And, you know, so change has to come. And, you know, I'm going to do whatever I have to do, Al, to make that happen if it takes me till the day I die. Because what happened to my son should be national news. People, it should not be, oh, that happened in Minnesota and nobody thinks anything of it, like it was just, you know, normal kind of thing happening. We need to push these stories so that people realize the real, true ugliness of how deep racism is here in Minnesota. And like George Floyd, unfortunately, was one of many sacrificial lambs to shed light on what has been going on in the dark for too long. And I know I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
Well, I have a copy of just something that you sent me from via email, and it's an article that says from CBS's website, DOC Commissioner credits mother of Hardell Sherrill for new investigation into his 2018 death in Beltrami County Jail. And the one statement here in that article says, quote, our recent review of Hardell Sherrill's death uncovered longstanding and problematic processes that led to a failure to uncover the truth about what occurred during Mr. Sherrill's 9-day incarceration, quote, end of quote. And that's by the Commissioner of Corrections, Paul Schnell. I'm not sure when this article was written. I think 2020, July in 2020. Yeah. And so what has changed since that time? And second question is, have you and the family pursued either civil or criminal charges in this case? What's available to you for redress?
Yes.
If you can talk about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. As I was just telling you about the DOC and the things that we have kind of woven into the bill under, with the Hardell Sherrill Act, my attorney and I sat down, like I said, and we kind of went back and forth. And the DOC with Paul Schnell, he has been very helpful in realizing that, these things happened before he was the DOC commissioner. But he's taking responsibility because he wants to make sure that what happened to Hardell never happens again. And so he's been working with me to make sure that all of these things are kind of coming together. But now, like I said, that was one House committee, Criminal Justice, Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform Committee that, passed that bill. And now we have to go through another committee in the House before it even gets to the Senate. But I am prayerful, and I believe that God is absolutely going to allow this bill to become law, because we can't keep doing business as usual. It's costing too many lives. It's hurting too many families, and it is tearing up the Black community. And people need to know enough is enough. We're sick and tired, as the song said, of being sick and tired. And I, as a mother who's grieving the loss of her only child, should not have to be jumping through I'm out protesting, I'm out rallying, I'm out doing all these things. I'm, trying to make change in legislation and so on and so forth. But yes, we had to get a lawsuit. We have a civil lawsuit going. The FBI is currently investigating my son's case. And we are looking and expecting, okay, let me repeat that. We are expecting criminal charges to come, but we are expecting convictions to follow, because what they did to my son was absolutely criminal on every level. They violated my son's constitutional rights in so many different areas. And it's just appalling to see that 2.5 years later, after all this pounding of pavement, yelling and going out and protesting and rallying and just doing everything that I know humanly possible to do, outside of praying to my Heavenly Father, who I know can do anything and can do all things through us. Amen. Amen. I'm just appalled that after 2.5 years, not one license has been revoked or suspended. Not one person has been laid off, fired. And now I'm so angry.
So we've got connectivity issues again.
They need to,
Brother Philip Holmes, jump in again. Let's just impressions of what we're talking about so far.
Okay, so what we have to keep in mind is that we are equally pay our taxes just like everybody else. We're not getting what our tax dollars are paying for. I certainly don't want my tax dollars tied in to a cold-blooded murder like we saw with that brother lying in his own waste for 8-9 days. That's not what this is supposed to be about. But what they do is, You know, it's funny how we're equal when it comes to paying taxes, when it comes to all the rest of it, but yet and still, we don't get the return for our money. So what they do is they take our tax dollars, they allocate it someplace else. We don't know where that money goes. One thing I do know, defense budgets, police budgets, the courts, they never get cut. But yet they'll take money out of schools. They take money out of the infrastructure. They take money like that. So, and every time I've been talking lately, I'm trying to push this point across, is that no taxation without representation. That's what the so-called founding fathers placed into this stuff. And so what has happened is that we don't really look at what's going on. Just like the sister got finished saying, why do we have to get out there and scream and shout, you know, for something that should just be ordinary? That should be an ordinary process. Yes. And I was saying before, when she jumped off the line, it's like, what astounded me about this whole case was that nobody seemed to be interested. How could you look at something like that and just act like did nothing happen? Now, God is in this whole thing, Al. He's in it. And so once we put all of these stories on a national level, the world will begin to see how business is done in the state of Minnesota. Last year, there was a sister that I was dealing with. She had a plug with Van Jones with CNN. Now, this is before George Floyd. Now, here's what happened. I told her, I said, I want these stories to be told on a national level. She says, well, they don't think Minnesota has a race problem. Okay? That's just how clever the racist system is up here. Then after George Floyd, they said, oh, we want you to come on the show. We see it for what it is. And that's the reason why we need, and we're going to get national exposure. And a lot of people are going to be looked at that didn't do their jobs. Just like you said, 2.5 years, we're running around here trying to get justice that's easily allotted to other people, and we got to scream and beg and shout, and we're part of the system just like everybody else. So our tax dollars should be saying, "Hey, look, these guys need to be locked. They need to be locked up because that was cold-blooded murder."
Yes, it was.
You know, every place else, I understand when you commit a murder, there's some jail time behind it. And so I don't know what's so different about all of this, you know, and that's the thing. So once we get this story, God is going to make a way for us to get this story and all these other stories on a national level. It's going to cause a lot of embarrassment, and some heads are going to roll. Yep. Because the way they do it up here, Al, is that it's almost like being in the South back in the 50s. They're all in cahoots with each other. You go to one agency, you know, they act like they can do. They pass you along to somebody else, and they're all in cahoots with each other. You know, I ain't gonna mention no names, but I tell you, we've gone.
That'll be for the next show. I think we have to mention names, but listen, we're out of time. We're out of time. This has been an eye-opening and wonderful. Not wonderful because we're celebrating, but wonderful because we are allowing the truth to come forward. Wonderful. Amen. It's an important meeting, important conversation, but we are out of time. I want to thank you, Philip Holmes, for your voice, your insight, and your support for Sister Delshia Perry, her family, and for people and for taxpayers. And Delshia Perry, I want to thank you for having the courage to bring the story forward. Amen. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. God bless you.
rise and say my prayer. Little piece of bread to my mouth, little tea to wash it out. It's my daily tribulation, even though I'm a working man. I work so hard to make ends meet, oh yeah, with one suit and one shoe to my feet. Days are getting so hard, yeah, but I got to keep on pushing on this 9 to 5, working to stay alive. On my 9 to 5, working till sun goes down. As the sun sets in the west, I pack my things and head on home, thinking about tomorrow's journey as I try these streets alone. It's my daily tribulation, oh yeah, searching for liberation, yeah. Got to step out of Babylon, take a step to Mount Zion. Days are getting so hard, yeah, but I got to keep on pushing on this 9 to 5, working to stay alive. Oh, on this 9 to 5, yeah, working till sun goes down, sun goes down. Days are getting so hard, yeah, but I got to keep on pushing on this 9 to 5, working to stay alive. Oh, on this 9 to 5, working till sun goes down, sun goes down, sun goes. Yeah, working to stay alive. Oh, on this 9 to 5, yeah, working till sun goes down. Oh Lord.